On Newsmax Prime, saying he'll tell it like it is, Christie becomes the 14th GOP presidential candidate. Our political panel will tell it like it is about his chances. But Donald Trump may have already cornered the market on candor. Coming up, his unvarnished assessments of Hillary Clinton and Karl Rove. Plus, another extension of the deadline for a deal with Iran. Alan Dershowitz and Fred Fleitz offer their insights. Newsmax Prime starts now. Good evening and welcome to Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Several stories of prime interest tonight. That deadline for the nuclear deal with Iran has been extended until July 7th. Negotiators acknowledging they still have some, quote, significant gaps, while President Obama says the U.S. will walk away if Iran cannot meet the terms set out in that agreement. More on that a little later. But first, ready to fight for the people. That's part of what New Jersey Governor Christie had to say as he becomes the 14th Republican candidate to officially enter the 2016 race for the Oval Office. Miranda Kahn has more from our Newsmax Prime newsroom. Miranda?
J.D. Christie has always been a politician not afraid to speak his mind, which is why it's not surprising his campaign motto is, "Tell it like it is."
America is tired of hand-wringing and indecisiveness and weakness in the Oval Office. We need to have strength and decision-making and authority back in the Oval Office, and that is why today I am proud to announce my candidacy for the Republican nomination for President of the United States of America.
And with that announcement earlier today, Christie kicks off his 2016 presidential campaign during a rally at his old high school in Livingston, New Jersey. Christie touched on a wide variety of topics, but used the opportunity to knock out current standing in the world under the Obama administration.
There is only one indispensable force for good in the world, and it is a strong, unequivocal America that will lead the world and not be afraid to tell our friends we'll be with you no matter what, and to tell our adversaries there are limits to your conduct, and America will enforce the limits to that conduct.
Governor Christie also reminded supporters why his campaign motto is, "Tell it like it is."
When I stand up on a stage like this in front of all of you, there is one thing you will know for sure. I mean what I say, and I say what I mean, and that's what America needs right now.
That Bridgegate scandal that has consumed much of the headlines for him over the past year and a half has taken its toll on Governor Christie's standing among Republican voters. But many say it's his personality that may help him stand out in a crowded GOP field. J.D.?
Thanks, Miranda. For more, let's call on our political panel. Skyping in from New York City, we welcome Betsy McCaughey, the former lieutenant governor of the state of New York, and checking in from Washington, D.C., the former deputy staff secretary to President Bill Clinton, David Goodfriend. So, Betsy, Christie says he's going to be straightforward and tell it like it is. What about Governor Christie as a presidential candidate?
Well, he obviously will have no trouble garnering attention, even in this very crowded field. He's brash, he's big, he's bold, and he's irresistibly likable. But here is the problem. There are 6 governors in this mix, and some of them have very strong records of job growth, of lowering taxes, of reducing regulation, of promoting fossil fuel energy growth. He doesn't have that because he's in a blue state. And it is still blue even with Christie as governor. And that's a big problem. It's a state with very high taxes, very high debt per capita. And that's going to be a problem with him when he stands next to Rick Perry, John Kasich, Jeb Bush, or some of the other governors. Bobby Jindal?
Well, let's see what the view is from the other side of the aisle. David, Governor Christie talks tough, but he says you got to compromise. How do Democrats view his candidacy?
Well, I think there really was a turning point with the bridge scandal for Governor Christie. He was well-liked among labor unions in New Jersey. He was well-liked among a lot of hard-hat Democrats in New Jersey. But I do think that the bridge scandal did something that can be fatal in politics. People have a preconceived notion of an elected official, and if a scandal breaks that just reinforces that notion, it can be very hard to recover from that. I think that's what happened here. That having been said, I think Chris Christie would actually pose a bigger threat in a general election than some of the more conservative candidates. The question I have is whether a relatively, and I say relative to the rest of the field, relatively moderate Republican from a blue state can actually win the Republican nomination in this day and age. That I find a little hard to believe. I think the nomination is going to go to a more conservative person from a more conservative state, and that will ironically pose a greater problem for the Republican Party in the general election.
All right, David, we just issued
this. The real issue is take-home pay. That's the biggest issue on American minds, and they want somebody who has demonstrated being able to create job growth in his own state. And when you look at somebody like Rick Perry and compare it to Chris Christie, it's a tough sell for Chris Christie.
All right, fair enough. Let's go across the bridge, literally and figuratively, into New York City, Betsy, to Donald Trump, who's been getting a lot of pushback since his, quote, controversial comments on illegal immigration. Now both NBC and Univision have canceled their deals with Donald Trump, and apparently now there is pressure from Macy's to sever its business relationship with him on the ties. What's that, Betsy?
I laughed my guts out when I heard that NBC was worried about what Donald Trump said. NBC, that hires the biggest racist demagogue of them all, Al Sharpton.
Yeah, what about that, David Goodfriend? You know, you got a situation where suddenly NBC's after Donald Trump, but you've got Al Sharpton, whose problems are legion, are they not? Alleged tax evasion, so forth and so on. And that's only recently. What about it, David?
There is no doubt that Al Sharpton is a controversial figure, but he's not running for president. And I think that's a distinguishing factor here. When Univision said that they were so offended by Donald Trump's comments about Mexicans and Mexican Americans that they refused to carry the Donald Trump Miss America pageant, they sort of set in motion a pattern. And I think that NBC felt pressure to follow suit. I think the bigger question is, can somebody who is wearing two hats at the same time really function? I mean, Donald Trump is a very wealthy man with a lot of business interests. He's trying to operate those businesses at the same time that he's running for president. It may be there are conflicts. I don't mean like a legal conflict. I just mean a conflict in the two operations. So now his presidential aspirations and the things he says to win votes among conservatives in a Republican primary are harming his business interests. Maybe he doesn't care, but he's wearing two hats at the moment, and that can get very awkward.
One friendly amendment, David, it's the Miss Universe, Miss USA pageant rather than Miss America. But put that friendly amendment in there. Let me move now to the Democrats. Hillary Clinton now coming out in support of President Obama's proposal to make up to 5 million salaried workers eligible for overtime. Here's what Mrs. Clinton tweeted out. The measure would be good for the economy. Betsy, you talked about take-home pay. What about this move? 30 seconds.
This is going to be devastating for job growth, because every time you add regulations that make it more expensive for employers to hire, they hire fewer people, they hire more part-time people, and here is the problem. We have a president currently in office and a woman running for president, and both of them have absolutely no experience running anything. Mrs. Clinton couldn't run a gas station, and that's the problem. Anyone who's run a business of any size knows that regulation destroys job growth, and that's what we need in this country. And let me just add that 29% of what households spend just on ordinary items is caused by regulation jacking up prices.
Understood. Let's give David 20 seconds to get in here. Go ahead, David.
I'm going to quote Ronald Reagan and say, there you go again. You know, every time someone like this lieutenant governor here says that regulations are going to kill jobs, the United States ends up being the greatest economy in the world no matter what. And here's why. 70% of our economy is consumer spending. Therefore, if you don't have money in your
understood.
pocket,
we'll have to leave it there. To you both, our thanks. Still to come, the deadline for the Iranian nuclear deal has been extended. We'll talk about it with former intelligence analyst Fred Fleitz and Newsmax blogger Alan Dershowitz. Then later, illegal immigration and the threats coming from south of the border. We'll hear from Glenn Spencer and Michael Cutler. But first, I talked to Donald Trump about Hillary Clinton and Karl Rove. More of my exclusive interview with the 2016 Republican candidate And we'll have it for you next when Newsmax Prime continues.